Hi, I'm Maggie Bowman, and we're here today with one of our new Art Harvest Studio Tour artists. The 30th anniversary of our tour is coming up, October 4, 5, 6, and 11, 12, 13. And today I would like to welcome Karin Carter. Nice to have you here with us today.
Thanks so much, Maggie.
So Karin, you do a lot of things with clay and sculpture. What can you tell me about this piece? I love it. What's going on?
Well, to tell you about this piece, I have to back up a bit.
Okay, we've got time.
Okay. So actually, I came to sculpture from quilt making, as one does.
Okay.
I was making, first everything had to look antique, and then everything had to be original when I was quilt making. And then I started sewing on paper bags and nailing fabric to wood, and just thinking, I maybe need to take an art class. So I took myself off to adult ed and took drawing and bookbinding and woodworking and figure sculpture. So I did figure sculpture for a year, and we moved away. And when I moved back, something pulled together for me, and I finally started to be able to finish a sculpture in the time that we had. So this was in a class where you came in, you got your stuff, you got working, you cleaned up. You couldn't come back for a week.
Oh, so something might be dry by the time you come back.
We worked very hard to not let things dry out. So you'd spray your work while you were working, and you'd maybe wrap it in fabric and plastic and try to keep it wet. Yeah. So figure sculpting was going along, and then boom, COVID came.
Yeah.
Class shuts down, and all I've ever done is figure sculpture in a class with a model and a teacher. It was a big class, so teacher time was like, okay, you get 30 seconds this week.
Wow.
So, but she was talking, so there was lots of interesting things to hear about. So when the class shut down, I had 2 little partial bags of clay, and I sat down. At the time I was doing caregiving for my dad, and I sat down at the kitchen table. My dad is sitting at the other end of the table just staring at me, because he was a potter a couple times during his life. He was in construction, but he was one of those physical guys who could do anything. So I was intimidated to make a figure without a model. And I thought, well, I'll just start making some practice bits. I'll make some body parts. So I ended up making, with a little scrap, I thought, oh, well, I'll practice. I'll put a nose and a mouth on it, and then I put one eye. And then I thought, well, now that I have this little plaque thing, I'm going to make it stand up. I'm going to put some feet under it. So I just started playing.
I can see it.
Yeah, it's a playful thing. I mean, I loved having that basis, that classic, this is how you do a body, and it is a lot of work to put things in proportion and to get the whole thing to feel like there's weight where there's really weight when a body is sitting or standing. And I just went off in the direction of, okay, now let's do some hands and feet. And I was living in Santa Barbara at the time, where my dad was, and I was seeing a lot of palm trees. One day driving, I found myself doing this with my hand, and I thought, wow, this looks like a palm tree. So this is somewhat tree-like to me.
They do look like palm trees.
Yeah, palm
trees, got it.
Not on purpose, but that's kind of where it started, and I thought, well, how am I going to support it? And, I'll just give it some feet. So one thing leads to another.
A little bit?
You bet.
We could have put it on a Lazy Susan.
That would have been handy.
Stop it. No, this is so much fun. What were you thinking when you did this? Can you put words to that?
It wasn't until afterwards. So it started with wanting to make something and not wanting to do a whole body because I didn't have a model. Right. So I had a hand I could look at,
And you had feet.
And I had feet. And what I thought about afterwards was that moment of disconnect. When you look at hands rising out of feet, there's a moment of, what is that? And it's a moment of wrong. It's startling in a way. It doesn't startle me anymore because I've been around it a lot. But I realized I loved that feeling of unfamiliarity. It was interesting to me to see what would happen, and so I've done face on feet and hands and feet together. I've put horns on people. I've painted some zebra stripes on a face. It's on feet, and some leopard on somebody with horns, and just crazy, just letting it flow.
How do you feel when you're working on stuff like that? Do you feel...
When you're working on it, for me, it's more technical.
Yeah.
Because the feet and the hands have to be at roughly the same hardness and wetness of clay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to want to break apart.
Or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of technical things that you have to be thinking about. And I'm thinking about what's the position of the hand going to be? And, do they look like they're under tension, or do they look relaxed? And that's what I'm thinking about.
This brings me joy. It doesn't freak me out at all.
Good.
But that's me. I love the creativity of doing something that just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super fun.
Do you challenge yourself to see how odd you can get?
You can say weird.
Weird you can get?
No, it just happens.
It just happens, okay.
Apparently, I'm just weird underneath.
That makes it fun.
It is fun. I actually consider it playful.
I can see that.
Yeah, and when something makes me laugh, I love it. And then when people look at my work, sometimes they will laugh, and then they're like, "Oh, sorry," and I say,
do you like
I
to
laugh
watch their
too.
reactions when they're looking at your stuff?
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Well, what are your thoughts about being on the tour this year?
It's really an unknown.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to come, how many people will come, who's going to be interested. So we'll see what happens. It's exciting, though. I mean, it's the opportunity to meet a lot of people. That's super fun.
You will.
You get a lot of weird comments about art, like you make figurines, or I've had people say stuff like that to me, and to me, figurines are a whole different thing. I don't make anything with a mold. Everything is starts with a bag of clay, and it's coming from inside. I'm not being commercial about it. I'm making something that moves me. I think the body is so interesting. Something like, how do people's ears look, really? And just the details of the body are just so fascinating to me. Like the angle, the cant of the neck that everybody has. I love this stuff.
Did you do artwork as a child?
I did. My mom was a kindergarten teacher.
Okay. Good,
So
good.
talk about an enriched environment.
Yeah.
We had a huge chest that was full of drawers, full of paper and, kid art supplies.
Rich.
Yes, and we were encouraged to do that. And then she also sent me to a local lady who did art classes in her home.
Cool.
And this was in the 70s and 60s, whatever. I don't know. How old am I? She had cairns that she had made, just stacks that were improbably tall. They must have been, they must have had metal going up through them in her yard, so she was just unusual, although she was quite ordinary looking or whatever, everyday looking, but her home was kind of out there.
But doesn't that just go to show you that what you see on the outside is not who someone is? And
yes,
it helps us remember not to judge people.
Yes.
Like, you're an artist, well, come here, or someone, it's another surprise.
Yes. Yes, and you and I are old enough that we should know better, but you still can be surprised.
We should know better. We get opportunities to practice that, don't we?
That's right.
We do. Have you worked with you told me you worked with a lot of other mediums. Do you ever add a glaze, a color to these or paint them?
So this one is actually painted.
Okay, I wondered.
And I have glazed a couple times, but glaze, oh my gosh, it's a whole area of learning. And I have felt so far like I'm learning about how to do the clay, how to manage it. The higher you go and the bigger you go, the more technical difficulties you're going to get yourself into. I have glazed a little bit, and I have wrecked some things with glaze.
Sure.
And I mostly paint. So occasionally they're naked, but then you have to seal them up.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your studio.
Oh, I am spoiled for studio space, contrary to a lot of people.
What town do you live in?
I live in Newburgh.
Newburgh, okay.
And the clay, we just moved there 2.5 years ago, and partly because of the Yamhill Cultural Center.
Right, isn't that wonderful?
It's amazing. And they have a clay studio, which is unusual, hard to find. So I do a lot of clay work there, and we landed in Newburgh because we were shopping for a house that had a shop.
Okay.
So we ended up with a shop, and the house that we have has an upstairs living room or family room that is my in-the-house studio, and I now have an in-the-shop studio and the Yamhill Cultural Center. So I have no excuses not to do things. I should be working all the time.
Well, you gotta go with the flow. Do you ever teach people how to play with clay, or do you ever supervise or have people over to play with clay?
Just the tiniest bit.
Yeah.
But it would be of interest. It's a long process.
It is.
You've got to, depending on what you want to do. But if you are going for realism, there's a lot you need to know. And I don't know everything by any means, looking at these feet. Podiatrist would have a word with me, but...
Hey, their feet, those are feet. Nobody's going to question that.
I find that I actually am not super drawn to, I'm fine with looking at it, but I'm not that interested in doing photorealism.
Right.
I don't want to know every muscle in the body, but I want you to believe that you're looking at hands and feet. I want to have enough details that are correct that you believe it.
Is this the one and only one you've done with 3 feet and 3 hands? Have you tried another one?
I have done one other that was smaller. And sure enough, one of the hands went, whoop. But it looks okay. You know, that reminds me, when I'm working, I tend to go with the flow. I'm taking a new class at the Cultural Center, and I was trying to roll out a slab on the slab roller. Well, it's a different slab roller than was there last year. And I am not familiar with the controls, so I rolled it out extremely thin. It was so thin I could not get it off the cloth that's there.
Yeah.
So it crunkled itself all up.
Ooh.
And crunkled, that's a new word.
I knew exactly what you meant.
Yeah. So it made me remember that I had an idea a long time ago that I wanted to do a still life out of clay, reminiscent of Cézanne's paintings of apples on drapery.
Oh.
But do something out of clay. And then as I was driving home so I did. It's small, and I made little tiny pears instead of apples because I have a thing for pears.
Yes, Bartlett pears, yeah.
Any pear, any of that. It's just such a beautiful shape and color.
Does your family enjoy your artwork?
They do. And my dad just got the biggest kick out of watching me because I made a fair number of pieces while I was sitting at that kitchen table. It got him all excited, and he went out and he bought a kiln and a wheel. But he's 96 now. This is a few years ago.
Yeah.
So he couldn't use them.
But he had the ideas and the enthusiasm.
He did.
I think you're genetically hardwired to do this.
That could be.
Isn't that interesting?
That could be.
Well, Karin, I am so excited for you being one of our new artists. There are over 60 artists in the tour this year. And I want to also let people know that there are places they can pick up their buttons for the tour. There are places in each town. In McMinnville, there's Artemis Fox Studio, Currents Art Gallery, Mary Artist, Pacific Frame and Gallery, Velvet Monkey Tea Shop. In Newburgh, people can buy their pins at Art Elements Gallery, Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce, and the Cultural Center. And in Amity at the gallery called Earth and Wood. So we cover the whole county, and welcome to the Art Harvest Studio Tour. It's a special one, it's the 30th. And folks, I hope you have a chance to stop by and see our new artist, and we'll see you later.